The call came in at 6:47 on a Thursday evening, and I almost didn't take it. I was already in my truck, parked outside a hardware store in Glendale, eating a sandwich I'd bought an hour ago and kept forgetting about. My last job had run long, a restaurant kitchen in Burbank with a gas line that kept pressure dropping for reasons nobody could explain until I spent 4 hours tracing it back to a corroded fitting behind a wall they'd drywalled over sometime in the 90s. My hands still smelled like flux and grease. I was tired in the specific way you get tired when your brain has been solving problems for 9 hours straight and just wants to stop. Then my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Area code 310. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Is this the plumber?" A woman's voice. Calm, but with something underneath it that wasn't calm at all. "Yeah, this is Theo. I got your number from Frank Doyle. He said you were the best he'd worked with." A pause. "I have a situation." That word. Situation. That word. Situation. That word. Situation. In this business, that word means one of two things. Either something embarrassing and minor that a homeowner has convinced themselves is a catastrophe, or an actual catastrophe. "What kind of situation?" I asked. "The kind where I have 40 people arriving at my home in 2 hours for a fundraiser, and my main bathroom on the first floor is flooding through the ceiling of my wine cellar." I put the sandwich down. "Give me the address," I said. She lived in Bel Air. I figured that out before she finished saying the street name. The drive took me 22 minutes through traffic that should have taken 35, because I pushed it a little more than I usually do when I'm not sure what I'm walking into. The house was the kind of place that doesn't announce itself from the street. Just a gate, a call box, hedges tall enough that you couldn't see anything beyond them. I told the call box my name and the gate opened, and then the driveway curved around for 100 feet before the house appeared. Big, but not ostentatious. Clean lines, warm stone, the kind of architecture that said someone had hired a very good person and then trusted them completely. Lights were on everywhere on the ground floor. A catering van was parked near the side entrance. 2 people in black uniforms were carrying trays toward the back of the house with that brisk, practiced walk caterers get. And then there was her. She was standing at the top of the front steps in a dark navy dress that looked like it had been made for her. Phone pressed to her ear, one hand holding the railing in a way that told me she was steadier than she felt. When she saw my truck, she ended the call and came down the steps before I'd even turned off the engine. "Theo?" she said. "That's me." She looked at my truck, then at my toolbox, then at me. "I'm Petra." She held out her hand and shook mine once, firmly. No hesitation about the grease. "The bathroom is through the main hall, second door on the left. I've had 2 people try to explain it to me in the last 30 minutes, and I still don't understand what happened." "That's okay. I don't need the explanation. I need to see it." Something in her face shifted slightly, like she'd expected to have to convince me of something, and I'd just removed that item from her list. "Then follow me," she said. Inside, the house had that particular tension of a space being prepared for other people. Flowers being arranged on a table near the entry, someone adjusting lighting near the back hallway. A low classical piece playing from somewhere above us. Polished and composed on the surface, and underneath it, running through all of it like a current, the specific panic of something going wrong that you cannot allow to go wrong. The bathroom was obvious before we even opened the door. I could hear it. That faint hiss and drip that means water has found somewhere it shouldn't be. Inside, one of the supply lines to the toilet had failed at the valve. Not a dramatic burst, but a slow, pressurized leak that had been going for long enough to saturate the floor, wick up the baseboard, and find the gap in the subfloor where the wine cellar ceiling started. I crouched down, checked the valve, checked the line, checked the shutoff. "Okay," I said, "I can fix this. Give me an hour." "I have less than 2 hours before people arrive." "I know, I said an hour." I looked up at her from the floor. She was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and that look on her face. Not impatient exactly, more like she was running calculations. How likely is this person to actually deliver? Whether she should be making a second call right now as a backup. "You can make your backup call," I said, "but I'll be done before they even get here." She looked at me for a second. Frank said you do that. Do what? Read the room. I didn't answer that. I got to work. The valve replacement was straightforward. The subfloor moisture I couldn't fully fix in 60 minutes. That would need drying time and a follow-up. But I could stop the source, clear the standing water, and make the bathroom functional and presentable before her guests arrived. I've worked in enough high-stakes kitchens and event spaces to know what good enough for tonight looks like versus actually solved. And I knew how to communicate that difference clearly. What I didn't expect was her. She checked in once about 20 minutes in to ask if I needed anything. I asked for a bucket and some towels. She came back with both in about 90 seconds, which meant she knew exactly where things were in her own house. A small thing, but it registered. Some people in houses like this have to call someone else to find a bucket. She didn't. At the 45-minute mark, I came out to find her. She was standing near the kitchen, away from the catering staff, looking out at the back patio through the glass doors. The lights out there were on now, strung low across a pergola, and the whole space had that soft, golden, ready-for-company look that made it hard to remember anything had been wrong at all. It's done, I said. She turned. The flooding? Source is fixed. New valve, new line. Bathroom is clean and functional. The subfloor has some moisture I can't fully resolve tonight. You'll need a follow-up inspection in a couple days once it dries. I'd recommend running a small fan in there overnight. I have a card with my number. Call me Friday or Monday and I'll come back and check it. She was quiet for a moment, just looking at me. You said an hour. It's been 52 minutes. That did something to her expression I didn't expect. Not a smile exactly, more like something relaxed that had been pulled tight for a while. Would you like a drink before you go? She said. The caterers have everything set up. I'm still on the clock, I said. I've got the invoice to write up. Write it at the kitchen counter. It's better than your truck. I should have said no. I had one more thing to check after this, and paperwork I'd been putting off for 3 days, and a reason to keep things professional and clean. But I was tired, and the kitchen smelled like something good the caterers had been preparing, and there was something about the way she said it, not an offer exactly, more like a simple statement of fact, that made declining feel unnecessarily complicated. So I sat at the island with my invoice forms, and she poured 2 glasses of water and set one near me without asking, and for a few minutes neither of us said anything at all. Then she said, "You told me you could read the room. What do you read right now?" I looked up from the invoice. That you've been managing this event for at least a month, and tonight is the one night something was allowed to go wrong. She looked at the glass in her hands. Closer to 6 weeks. What's the fundraiser for? Children's arts education. I sit on the board. We're trying to fund a residency program for public school kids in the district. She said it the way people say things they care about but have learned not to lead with, like they've been in rooms where leading with it makes people assume too much. That's real work, I said. It's necessary work, she said, which isn't always the same thing. I looked at her. She was leaning against the counter with the glass held in both hands, and in the kitchen light, without the controlled composure she'd had on the front steps, she looked like someone who'd been going full speed for a long time and was allowing herself 30 seconds to stop. Does it always go like this? I asked. Controlled chaos followed by a deadline? She almost smiled. Pretty much. I finished the invoice, slid it across the counter. She looked at it, then looked at me. This is less than I expected. It's what it is. Frank told me you'd say that too. She set down her glass and signed the bottom of the form with a pen she pulled from a drawer like she knew exactly where it was. Then she tore off the duplicate and handed it back. I'll pay the follow-up call in advance. Same rate. You don't have to do that, I know. She held out her hand again. Thank you, Theo. I shook it. I left. I sat in my truck at the end of her driveway for a minute before I pulled out onto the street, and I couldn't have told you exactly why. I told myself I wasn't thinking about Petra after that. That was the lie I committed to for about 48 hours. The truth was, I thought about the way she'd handed me a bucket without losing her composure. The way she'd said necessary work like the distinction mattered to her. The way the kitchen had gone quiet when it was just the two of us, and how it hadn't felt awkward, which was strange because it probably should have. I checked my phone Friday morning to see if she'd called. She hadn't. I told myself that was fine and completely expected. She was a woman with a house in Bel Air and a charity board seat and 40 people at her fundraiser. I was the plumber who'd fixed her valve and left before the guests arrived. That was the whole story. Then Saturday afternoon, while I was running a pressure test on a job in Silver Lake, my phone buzzed. A text, her name, because I'd added her number to my contacts without fully deciding to. The bathroom fan is still running. Everything looks dry so far. Wanted to let you know. And then, a few seconds later, also the fundraiser went well. I stared at that second message for a while. Then I typed back, glad to hear it. I can come Monday to check the subfloor if you're around. She responded in under a minute. I'm around Monday, and I'll have coffee this time. That shouldn't have meant anything. It was just coffee. People offer plumbers coffee all the time. Still thought about it for the rest of Saturday. Monday, I showed up at 9. She answered the door in a different version of herself. Dark jeans, a cream-colored shirt, hair back in a way that looked less arranged than it had on Thursday, more at ease. Like the event version of her had been a separate setting. The subfloor was drying well. I checked it thoroughly, confirmed there was no deeper moisture behind the baseboard, and gave her the clear. 30-minute job, total. She had coffee waiting at the counter the way she'd said. And this time, when she offered for me to sit, I didn't have an invoice to write as a reason. We talked for almost an hour. She asked how long I'd been on my own. I told her 6 years, started out with a large company in the valley, learned everything I could, then went independent when I figured out the only person getting rich off my labor was the guy whose name was on the vans. She asked if I liked working alone. I said I liked being the one who decided what the problem actually was and how to solve it without running it through 3 people who hadn't seen the pipe. She laughed at that, a real one, quick and unguarded. She told me about the residency program, how she'd been pushing for it for 2 years through a board that moved like it was running on courtesy and inertia, how the fundraiser Thursday had actually cleared the last of the funding gap and now it was just paperwork. I asked why she cared so much. She was quiet for a second. I grew up without much, she said finally. Not in this house. In a different kind of house, in a different kind of city. She turned the coffee cup in her hands. I didn't have a lot of people telling me that what I made mattered. And I think about what it would have meant if someone had. I didn't say anything for a moment. You don't interrupt something like that. What did you make? I asked. Drawings mostly. I still do. She glanced briefly toward a door at the far end of the kitchen hallway. Then she looked back at me, and the moment passed. I noticed the look. I didn't say anything about it. I left with the sense that I had been shown something without being shown everything, and that the part I hadn't been shown was the more interesting part. I made myself wait 5 days before I replied to the follow-up text she sent checking in on the repair. Then I made myself wait another day after that. Then I stopped making myself wait and just answered. That was how it started, slowly and without either of us naming it. A text here, a question there. She asked once if I ever took on projects that weren't emergencies or if I only worked when something was already broken. I said I preferred it when things were already broken because then at least you knew what you were dealing with. She said that was either very practical or very sad. I said it was probably both. The second time I came back to the house, it wasn't for a repair. She'd texted to ask if I wanted to see something she was working on. Just that? I'm working on something in the back room if you want to see it. Like it was a casual thing, easy, no weight to it. I knew it wasn't. I came on a Sunday afternoon. She led me through the kitchen and down the hallway to the door she'd looked at Monday morning. Inside was a room that stopped me completely. It wasn't a studio exactly. She hadn't called it that, but that's what it was. A long oak table covered in paper and drafting tools. A wall of reference images pinned in clusters, architecture, street photography, handwritten notes. A drafting lamp angled over a half-finished illustration of what looked like an old neighborhood. Rooftops close together, laundry lines, windows with plants in them. The smell of the room was linseed oil and paper and something older underneath. Like this space had been used and used and used. You do this every day, I said. Most days, when the rest of it clears out enough. I watched slowly along the wall of images. There was a quality to everything in the room that was different from the rest of the house. Less controlled. Less curated. There were drafts with mistakes still visible, pencil under ink, lines reconsidered and restarted. It felt like a record of someone actually thinking, which is different from seeing someone's finished thoughts. How long have you been doing this? I asked. Since I was a kid. I stopped for a few years when things got busy. She paused. I started again about 4 years ago, when I was trying to remember who I was outside of all of this. I turned to look at her. She was standing near the drafting table with her arms loosely at her sides, watching me move around the room like she was waiting to see what I'd do with it. Why'd you show me? I asked. Because you fixed my bathroom and didn't charge me for the second visit. That's not why. She looked at me steadily. No, it's not. The room felt different after that. Not heavier exactly. More honest. I started coming back. Not for anything you could explain to a third person with a straight face. She'd text and I'd come, and we'd spend 2 or 3 hours in that room, or in the kitchen, or out on the back patio when the evenings were warm enough, talking about things that felt too real for the situation we were technically in. She asked what I wanted. That wasn't the business. I told her about the idea I'd had for years. A small shop, just mine, where I could do restoration work on old fixtures and vintage plumbing hardware. Not emergency calls, not the constant scramble of independent contracting. Something slower. A place that was mine. I told her I'd been saving for it, but the math in Los Angeles didn't move fast. She listened in a way that wasn't polite listening. The kind where you know someone is actually storing it. I noticed that. I didn't know what to do with it yet. One evening in late October, she asked me to go with her to a reception at a museum in downtown LA, something for a design foundation she was involved with. She said it the same way she said most things, level, direct, without softening at first. I looked down at my boots by the studio door. Petra, what? I'm not really a museum reception kind of person. She didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking if you'll come. It's not the same thing. Something moved in her face. Not anger. Something quieter and more pointed. Every time you say something like that, she said, you're telling me you don't trust my judgment about my own life. Do you understand that? I didn't answer. I know what that room looks like, she said. I've been in it my whole adult life. I'm not bringing you there because I need someone to perform in it. I'm bringing you because it's a Tuesday and I'd rather have you next to me than not. I sat with that for a second. What do you tell people when they ask? The truth, that you're with me. Something about that was harder to argue with than I expected. I went to the reception. The first 20 minutes were everything I expected. A lot of careful small talk and name dropping, and that particular energy of rooms where everyone is networking while pretending to appreciate art. A man named something forgettable came over and asked how Petra and I knew each other with the specific smile people use when they're trying to figure out the answer before you give it. Petra said without hesitating, he's been working on my house, and now we're here. Simple, not defensive. Like there was nothing to decode in it. The man moved on. She didn't make a thing of it after, just touched my arm lightly and said, there's a hopper over here you'd actually like, and took me across the room. She was right. I did like it. On the drive back, she said, you didn't hate all of it. I hated less of it than I thought I would. That's practically a rave review from you. We ended up back at the house. She made tea in the kitchen while I sat at the counter, and neither of us said anything for a while. It was the specific quiet of two people who have stopped needing to fill the space. Then she said, without preamble, I want to tell you something, and I need you to actually listen. I looked at her. I've had people in my life who wanted what came with me, she said. The house, the connections, the fundraising dinners. People who were kind to me in proportion to how useful I was to them. I know what that feels like. She set down the mug. You're the first person in a long time who seemed genuinely uninterested in what I can do for you, and I don't know if you understand how strange that is. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the tea cooling. Petra, I'm not finished. She held eye contact. I'm not telling you this because I want something from you in return. I'm telling you because I think you should know that when I let someone into that room back there, it's not something I do lightly. And I don't do casual things lightly either. And the way you've been carrying yourself around me like you're waiting for this to make sense on paper. She paused. It already makes sense. You're just the last one to know. I didn't have a clean answer to any of that. I'd been managing the distance in my head like a logistics problem. The difference in our circumstances, the way our lives looked from the outside, all the places where the math didn't work. And she had just quietly pulled all of it apart by saying the part I'd been avoiding saying to myself. What I felt, underneath all the careful management, was real. Had been for a while. I got up from the counter and crossed the kitchen, and she didn't move, just watched me come. And I put my hands on the counter on either side of her and said, "I'm not good at this part." "I know," she said. "Okay." "Okay," she said back, and then neither of us was talking anymore. After that, things got quieter and more serious in the way that happens when two people stop pretending. There was no performance of it. She didn't change the way she introduced me. I didn't start dressing differently or pretending to enjoy networking. She came to my side of the city once for no reason except that I'd mentioned a taco spot I'd been going to since I was 19, and she wanted to see what that was like. We sat in a booth with red vinyl seats under fluorescent lighting, and she ate 2 tacos and then ordered a third and said, "I genuinely can't believe how good these are," with a specific surprise of someone who didn't expect to be surprised. That was one of my favorite nights with her. The simplicity of it. She met my older brother at a thing I couldn't get out of in November. He pulled me aside afterward and said, "She's real, man," which from him meant something, because he's not generous with it. What I didn't expect was February. She told me she wanted to show me something, and we drove down to a stretch of commercial blocks near Jefferson Park she'd been vague about. She parked in front of a brick building with 2 large garage-style doors and an office window up front, and a 4EH sign that had been taken down recently because you could still see the ghost of the sticker on the glass. I stood on the sidewalk looking at it. "This isn't what I think it is," I said. "Walk through it with me first." Inside, high ceilings, concrete floors, a back storage area with solid shelving, a front office that needed work but had good bones, and the 2 service bays with drains already in the concrete. I stood in the middle of the main floor and didn't say anything for a long time. "I found it in October," she said. "I've been sitting on it for 4 months because I wasn't sure how to tell you. Petra, you described this place to me. Not this exact building, but everything that matters about it. The space, the bays, the storage and back. The fact that it needs work and you'd rather it did because then you know you built it yourself." She put her hands in her jacket pockets. "The lease is manageable. I know a contractor who can do the office renovation for a fair price, and I have a lead on a grant for small trades businesses that you'd almost certainly qualify for." I looked at her. "You've been researching grant funding." "For about 3 months, yes." "Petra, I'm not handing you anything," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't quite. "I'm telling you it exists and that I think you're ready for it and that I would very much like to watch you build this." She paused. "Because I want the version of you that's not still waiting for permission." I turned and looked at the building again. The light coming through the high windows, the solid feel of the concrete under my feet, the way the space already felt like a different version of a future I'd held at arm's length for too long. "Why?" I asked. "Meaning all of it." She crossed the floor and stood next to me, both of us facing the empty bay together. "Because you came into my house on the worst night of a very bad week," she said, "and you made everything quiet in about an hour, and then you left before you had to. And then you kept showing up not because I asked you to, but because—" She stopped. Started again. "I am someone people perform for, Theo. All the time. You never performed. Not once. And I know what it costs to find that." She looked at me. "I love you. That's the whole answer." It landed the way things land when they're simply true. I didn't say it back right away. I stood there in the middle of that concrete floor with the afternoon light coming through the high windows and let it be real for a second. Then I said, "I love you too. And I've been terrible at showing that." "No," she said. "You've been careful. There's a difference." She leaned into my side, not dramatically, just there, solid and warm. "We can be careful together, just less separately." I put my arm around her and she fit against me the way she always did, like she'd figured out early on exactly how to make herself comfortable and had stopped pretending she hadn't. We stood there for a while in the empty building that was going to be mine. Behind us, the afternoon. Ahead of us, everything that comes after the part where you finally stop being afraid of it.